I'm going to look for just a couple more so that I see Fran, I see Commissioner Kehoe, Chris, I see Senator Newman. Love the punctuality. Awesome. Great. Is Mitch back on?
He will be momentarily.
Wonderful. Given that we've got some significant items to go through before the end of the day, and because Bridget, I think we know that Mitch is fully updated on the Interregional Transportation Strategic Plan update, I am going to make the executive decision to start. So I'm going to gavel us back in, and we are on item 21. Bridget and Jeannie, take it away.
Great, thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, Commissioners. Tab 21 is an informational item. Jeannie Ward-Waller, Deputy Director for Planning and Modal Programs at Caltrans, will provide an update on Caltrans' development of the 2021 Interregional Transportation Strategic Plan, or ITSP. The ITSP provides guidance for the identification and prioritization of interregional transportation projects to improve interregional mobility and the efficient movement of goods. In addition, the ITSP informs the selection of projects for the Interregional Transportation Improvement Program. With that, I will turn it over to Jeannie.
Thank you so much, Bridget. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right, great. Well, good afternoon, Chair Norton, Commissioners. I want to also just add my welcome and congratulations to the new commissioners, Commissioner Grisby and also Senator Newman, and congratulate Commissioner Tavaglione on his reappointment. Tavaglione, excuse me. So I am here to just provide you a status update on the ITSP, or the Interregional Transportation Strategic Plan. Given how much time the last item took, I'm going to do my best to be really quick and answer questions and really just focus on summarizing the discussions we've had in workshops and other outreach efforts with our partners, and also give you just an update again on the schedule, remind you of the schedule for development of the plan. So please jump to my first slide. What you see on the slide here are the goals for the California Transportation Plan 2050, which I know you were all familiar with. We've talked to you about it before. The 2021 ITSP will align with these goals and also align with CAPTI, which you've just had quite a bit of discussion about. So we really want to aim for consistency across all of these statewide planning efforts. We're also working on our California State Rail Plan, which also includes an intercity bus study. So that plan is being updated concurrent to the ITSP and will have quite a bit of overlap. So you'll see alignment between those two planning documents as well. Intercity bus and rail, as well as, of course, our California Integrated Travel Program, or CAL-ITP, which you heard about in January, are integral aspects of Caltrans' approach to improving interregional travel. Objectives in the ITSP are obviously focused on interregional travel, and the goals and objectives of this plan will also inform the ITIP, or the Interregional Transportation Improvement Program, which is used to, so they'll be used to assess projects for funding consideration. I want to just highlight the goals that are in bold. Climate, equity, and accessibility are three goals that are either new in the 2021 plan or have really gained more significance and importance to the state since the last ITSP. And of course, we're also carefully considering how COVID-19 has impacted the daily lives and travel patterns of Californians. We've seen a huge shift over the last year. So economic recovery, telework, broadband, items, such as these are emerging as even more important considerations for us in planning for the future transportation system. Next slide, please. So on this slide, you see two maps from the 2015 plan. The ITSP identifies the key interregional multimodal corridors and facilities in the state, and those form the basis of the ITIP priorities. So you see those corridors on the left, which are, kind of wide swaths, including land use. They are multimodal corridors, which is part of why they have that larger band. And then we also have on the right the key priority facilities that form the major linkages between the regions in California, as well as those intercity rail routes. Specific projects that support interregional travel will be identified through the development process of comprehensive multimodal corridor plans. That work is ongoing. It's conducted by the districts in close collaboration with our local and regional partners. Next slide, please. So we've led or participated in many workshops and meetings with local and regional partners on the ITIP so far. 3 workshops were held last November and December to solicit input from local, regional, and state agency partners, as well as advocacy groups. My staff have also presented at a number of partner meetings, such as those listed on the slide, and the ITSP team is available. They volunteered to attend meetings by invitation from partners at any point to provide updates and receive input. Just want to share a few key themes of the feedback that we've received from these workshops. Of course, improved connectivity throughout California, east-west, as well as rural to urban connectivity. Improving safety for all travelers, which is always Caltrans' #1 goal. Addressing maintenance and rehabilitation needs. Improving integration of multimodal travel and eliminating gaps in the multimodal network. Establishing sustainable funding for transportation projects. Providing equitable access improvements and support to state routes and facilities across the state, including to tourist destinations and local economies. Integrating and supporting state mandates for climate change objectives. And identify and maintain alternate routes for emergency evacuation. Many of the themes you've heard from commenters here today. So next slide, please. In terms of public outreach and engagement, once we have a draft of the ITSP, we will go into a public comment period between August 18th to October. In advance of releasing that public comment draft, we will be monitoring updates to CAPTI, to the final version of CAPTI and the strategies and principles contained within. And we'll be working closely also with our Division of Financial Programming as the department starts to work on development of the 2022 ITIP. So with that, I think my next slide just shows you the timeline. Sorry that the text is a little small on the slide, but this shows the timeline for development of both the ITSP, the plan, as well as the ITIP. These efforts, of course, overlap, although the ITSP is several months ahead and will be finalized before the ITIP in order to inform the program of projects. The draft ITSP is under development already. We've done quite a bit of outreach, as I just explained, and that draft plan will be released for public comment in August. And then the draft ITIP will be released about 2 months later. Both documents will be finalized towards the end of the year, and we aim to adopt the final ITSP before the end of the year. So that's all I have, and I'll be happy to take questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have one public comment. Justin, could you contact that public comment?
Yes, I see one attendee with their hand raised at this time. We have Mike Woodman.
Chair Norton, fellow commissioners, Mike Woodman, Executive Director of the Nevada County Transportation Commission and Chair of the North State Super Region. I just want to say I appreciate the early engagement with Caltrans on the update of the ITSP, specifically Francis Diaz-Sanchez and Scott Sauer. The ITSP is an important document. It drives the investment strategies for the ITIP. And by law, a minimum 60% of the ITIP funding must be allocated to projects on the interregional road system and intercity rail system outside of urban areas. Investments in these areas should address regional needs and priorities in the rural areas and should be determined in coordination with these rural regions. It's important that as a state, while we focus on equity and transportation planning and funding decisions, we need to ensure that there's a focus on geographic and economic equity across the state. Many of the rural areas across the state are economically disadvantaged and depend on interregional connections. And the CTP 2050, CAPTI, and the ITSP and state policy and funding decisions going forward need to acknowledge and address this issue. There must be a balance between the needs of intercity passenger rail and interregional highway projects and ensure that ITIP investments are able to leverage the limited rural regional improvement program funding on improvements that provide critical connections between rural disadvantaged communities and economic job centers and connections to multimodal options, and will help move us towards zero deaths on the highways. Although many of these rural interregional highway projects increase capacity, typically the focus of these projects is to improve safety, for example, improving a rural 2-lane highway to a 4-lane highway. And based on location, environmental setting, in the context of these projects, they're not likely to induce significant VMT, and we've implemented projects that prove that. And these are exactly the type of strategic capacity increasing projects that the state should be funding. Many of these capacity increasing projects are needed in order to be able to handle massive evacuations in areas of high risk of wildfires. And many of these corridors, the ITSP, the first ITSP was developed in 1998 and identified at that point 10 focus routes, which were the top 10 highest priority interregional facilities. State Route 49 in Nevada County was one of those. We've been working to complete that corridor since 1998, and 22 years later, we've completed 3 phases or 2 phases, working on the 3rd, but there's still more work to be done. So I want to make sure that, you know, as Caltrans begins the process to update the ITSP, that they look at identifying those corridors that are still need to be completed, and, you know, make it a priority to invest and partner with the regions to complete the unfinished business on these corridors. It really means saving lives, and it's critically important to the rural regions. You know, just want to leave you with these highway projects, you know, not only improve goods movement, safety, and operations, but they're important to the economic health and recovery of these rural regions. And it's crucial if we're going to truly have regions rise together out of COVID-19 that we complete these projects. So look forward to working with Caltrans on the update of the ITSP and continuing to have these dialogues. So thank you for the opportunity to comment.
Thank you very much. Senator Newman and commissioners, I don't see any other people who wish to speak, but I do know that Executive Director Weiss would like to speak on this item. Mitch?
Yeah, thank you. And I just want to follow up on what Mike was talking about, because this is something that the commission has talked about, you know, for certainly the last year and a half, and in specific for the last couple months. You know, we had wanted in this presentation something that talks about the functional gaps in the state's system. So it's not here in this presentation. When might we expect to receive that information?
Well, thank you, Mitch, for the question. As I said in my presentation, specific projects are identified through the development of comprehensive multimodal corridor plans that are conducted by the districts with the local and regional partners in those regions. That work is ongoing, and partly, you know, to conform with the CTC guidelines for those plans, as well as Caltrans guidance that we put out. The ITSP itself will not include a project list. Instead, it calls out those priority corridors that I mentioned, as well as key policy goals that inform our interregional investments going forward. We would be more than happy to have a deeper discussion with the commission on this issue, and I think provide a more thorough update on the status of those corridor plans, as well as, you know, the development of the needs and the areas of emphasis in those different regions. I think it would be very valuable to work together to define what we mean by those functional gaps in our multimodal system. and how we identify the solutions, you know, in line with the policy goals that we've discussed and how those are evolving over time, and really coming up with innovative solutions to address those needs. So we fully recognize that there are, you know, needs all over the state, all over the system. We want to work with you to identify the best path forward and make sure we're all on the same page in terms of how we're developing those investment priorities. So happy to have more discussion with you on that.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And just so I kind of, you know, lay an end marker on the line, I think the time we need to kind of have that finished up and have the information would be with the draft ITIP. Thank you.
Yep, I'll be happy to take that back to my leadership, and we'll follow up with you. Thanks, Mitch.
Thank you. If there are no further comments or input, we'll move to the next item. Thank you very much, Jeannie and Bridget. Appreciate your time. With that, we'd like to go to item 22, the draft 2021 State Highway System Management Plan. Tim Silverman and Mike Johnson.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, great. Thank you. Commissioners, item 22 is a Caltrans information item. California Streets and Highway Code section 164.6 requires Caltrans to publish a 10-year state highway system management plan as part of an overall asset management implementation. In odd number years, a draft of the plan is required to be submitted to the Commission for comments by February 15th and is required to be submitted to the Governor and legislative members by June 1st. During the January 21 CTC meeting, Caltrans presented a brief overview of the State Highway System Management Plan prior to it being submitted to the CTC for review and comment. Michael Johnson, the State Asset Manager for Caltrans, will be presenting an overview on a few of the items contained in the draft 2021 State Highway System Management Plan.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and Commissioners. Thank you for the opportunity to speak on the State Highway System Management Plan. As Tim mentioned, my name is Mike Johnson. I'm the State Asset Management Engineer for Caltrans. And in that role, my job is to lead the implementation of asset management and to lead the development of the SHOPP. This plan that I'll be talking about here today is the seed by which all planning and future projects in the SHOPP are born, with the exception of emergency projects. Next slide. The plan is a 10-year performance-based asset management look, so it's 10 years forward-looking. The plan includes an unconstrained needs assessment. This defines the need for the state highway system irrespective of available funding. The plan also includes a constrained investment plan. This is where we present the distribution of the funding that's anticipated from the STIP fund estimate to specific program areas for the next 10 years. And then with that constrained investment, what are the expected performance that we can anticipate from the available funds that we have? Next slide. The plan covers the period from July 1, 2021 through June 30th, 2030. That timeframe encompasses 3 years of the 2020 SHOPP, which the Commission has already adopted, plus 2 years that will be coming to the Commission in the 2022 SHOPP that's currently finishing up the planning process. And then in the last 5 years of the plan, we have what we call our performance gap, or the difference between where we expect that first 5 years of projects to take us relative to where we want to get ultimately. That performance gap is really the basis of our investment plan. And then throughout this entire 10-year period, we are also keeping an eye on and balancing our investment into our maintenance program as well, because the SHOPP and the maintenance program collectively are contributing a significant portion of the overall condition performance on the state highway system. Next slide. The plan includes a very transparent presentation of the assets, what the current inventory of each asset is, what the distribution of condition is. This is presented for all 36 objectives that are in the plan. Next slide. For the 2021 plan, the commission staff asked that I focus on some of the new additions. And even since I presented to you in January, we have made a change, which I noted in January was coming, but we've completed the reimagined SHOPP safety programs. And in this particular arena, we've consolidated 3 of our historic proactive safety programs into a single program element and changed its metric to be focused on performance measured in the ability of projects to reduce fatalities and serious injuries. We believe that this change and the focus on the performance of the outcomes of reduction in fatal and serious injuries will result in getting greater benefits for our proactive safety program. It continues to maintain our reactive safety program. So when we do have accident investigations that point to safety improvements, we have funds available to immediately address those needs. The plan also incorporates bike and pedestrian needs and investments for the first time. It includes our initial asset inventory for sidewalks, bike paths, and crosswalks in California, as well as funding to maintain that existing bike and ped inventory, as well as funds to build new bike and ped elements on the system. The plan includes our first estimate of the sea level rise mitigation costs. There's a whole chapter in our climate action section, which it really culminated quite a bit of analysis in GIS and significant work done by our planning division to quantify sea level rise levels and assets that would be impacted at different rise levels. So this is the first time that we've been able to present that. And then we've strived to really make a much more transparent presentation of some of the performance. This was a specific request of the commission in October of 2019, and we've tried to carry that out within this plan. Next slide. So the big, I guess the top line message, our unconstrained needs after everything was said and done is about $110 billion. Our 10-year funding over that same period is about $49 billion, which means we were able to fund about 45% of our identified needs. This is important because when we get into the investment plan, there's always questions, well, why aren't we investing more here or there? And I guess I would just remind the commission that we have 45 cents on the dollar relative to needs to invest. And so there is a prioritization that takes place in that constrained investment plan. Next slide. So as far as the process of the plan, we did our initial draft of the plan back in December of 2020. We received about 200 internal comments. We worked on those comments, incorporated most of them into our draft 2, which was submitted to all the MPOs and RTPAs statewide in January. That comment period closed at the end of February. We received approximately 90 comments from our external partners. And then today we anticipate in the next agenda item to receive additional comments from the commission. We will take all of these comments back and we will modify the plan as appropriate, either providing additional narrative or making edits as appropriate. That will take place between March and May. And then by June 1, the plan is required by law to be transmitted to the governor and the legislative members. So with that, a very Cliff Note presentation, and hopefully appreciate the brevity after the afternoon that we've had. But at this point, I'd be happy to answer any questions on the plan.
Commissioners, we have no public comment on this item, I believe. Is that right, Justin?
Yes, Chair Norton, that is correct.
Okay. Mr. Johnson, I had a question for you, and that was, given that you've done this intense investigation and the SHOPP seems to have a significant amount of needs. Can you talk a little bit about how we are then looking at this as it relates to some of the items we've just been discussing about where we should be seeking additional funding, what SB1 intended to fund, et cetera? Because it sounds like you're identifying a great amount of needs, even as we look at a more multimodal system. And I want to commend you on the active transportation and complete streets component of the multimodal system.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Norton. You know, prior to the passage of SB1, we had about 25% of funding relative to need. So while 45% seems not ideal, it's significantly better than it was just a few years ago. And, you know, with those funds, we have to be very diligent in how we apply them in terms of investment. You know, certainly there are some priorities that we apply the funds to. Safety is one of the big priorities that we have, and it was also an identified priority within SB1. The fix it first approach, particularly to the 4 core assets, pavement, bridges, culverts, and transportation management systems, continues to be one of the primary focuses of investment. Those 4 core assets represent over half the funding that's available in the SHOPP is going to those 4 items. And when you add in safety and all the supplemental assets that make up the transportation system, as well as operational needs such as emergency response and permanent restoration, the combination of those is about 84% of available funds. So that means everything else we're trying to do is vying for about 16% of the funds. And that's where things really get, you know, down into the specifics of, you know, looking at what will a certain amount of funding get us in terms of benefits in this particular objective area versus another objective area. For this plan, we are proposing a fairly significant increase in building new bike and ped facilities. Part of that is driven by a lot of the discussion that just happened under the CAPTI item, but it's also a significant component of our safety improvements. So if we can, you know, increase our number of sidewalks, increase the number of crosswalks, we can get pedestrian and bicyclists into safer places. We hope to realize safety benefits from this, as well as emission benefits.
Thank you so much. We have 3 commissioners desiring to speak. I'm going to start with Commissioner Liu, then Commissioner Inman, and then Vice Chair Alvarado. Commissioner Liu?
Thank you. I noticed that in the list of assets that are tracked through the State Highway System Management Plan, that I'm glad to see, you know, the pedestrian, the bike assets being tracked, but I didn't see like dedicated bus lanes or express lanes or managed lanes being tracked. I was just wondering if Caltrans has an inventory of those assets too.
I believe we could produce an inventory of those assets. You know, one of the overarching criteria with the development of the State Highway System Management Plan is we have to stay within the regulations in terms of what the SHOPP is eligible to do. And there's very specific guidelines about adding capacity in the form of lanes. And so for that reason, we don't have a specific item related to managed lanes in the State Highway System Management Plan.
Okay. Someone, when I asked this question of staff, they mentioned the Transit Operators Asset Management Plan, which I don't believe I've seen, but I hear it exists, and I was just, you know, maybe some thought as to how the State Highway System Management Plan and the Transit Operators Asset Management Plan can work together, you know, functionally, would be a good idea. I sent staff a slide of figure 2.2. I think this is kind of important in the context of what we've been talking about today. Can you guys put that up? And if not, I'll start describing it. And I encourage people to take a look at it. because I found it both really interesting and a little scary, because it shows the status of our current highway system assets and the state of those assets if we didn't invest in them, and the state of the assets if we achieve the targets that we're setting for the 10 years. And when you look at it, you know, we're keeping our head above water, but not greatly. And there's not a huge difference, relatively difference, you know, between how much better things are going to be in 10 years. Right, here it is. And if you just take a look at this and compare the baseline condition to the targeted condition, you know, things get a little better, but it's not like overwhelmingly better. And my concern is that when the public thinks about all this extra gas tax and, you know, fee increases and registration fees and all that they're paying, they're expecting something different, and they're only looking at what they can see, and they're not thinking about what it would look like if in the do nothing column, you know, number 2, if we did nothing, how bad it would have gotten. And so in the context of all these investments that we're making, I think this creates a problem in terms of perceptions, of expectations and messaging for us. And I would just encourage, you know, our staff and CalSTA and the department to get together and try to figure out how best to handle this little conundrum that we have, other than coming up with that other 55% of the funding we need to make everything green, because I don't think that's happening anytime soon. But I would encourage our staff and CalSTA to really take a look at the perceptual and expectation issues involved here, and the messaging and how we talk about it, so that we don't create false expectations, but we also can explain to people that this is so much better than it would have been. That's my comment. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. As usual, Commissioner Liu, you have very insightful comments. And, you know, the way I'd like to look at this graphic is that we are constantly battling deterioration with our projects. And to the extent we can do more project work than deterioration, we improve. And if our project work falls below ongoing deterioration, we lose ground. And I think, you know, as our asset management has been maturing, and you know, there's certainly still room for us to improve from where we are. And we strive with each one of these plans to get better and to get more integrated. That basic fact never changes. That, you know, the pavement in California, for example, has a steady state need that will always be there. And it's a significant amount of money to maintain the highway system as it is. You know, with bridges, the same thing. There is a constant need that is cycling through, you know, our system. So we're going to address a few bridges, but as we're addressing those, there's others that are then falling into the state of needing some sort of work. And so as we're developing our investment plan, you know, we're using deterioration models. We're looking out to not beyond what we see today. We're looking at our pipeline of work to see, okay, how much have we already committed to in terms of our funding for the next 5 years? And then what do we get at the end of that, which is really that fourth column from the left there. And then realizing that are we at our goals, or do we still have more work to do? And if we have more work to do, that would command additional investment.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, our next speaker is Commissioner Inman.
Thank you, Chair Norton. So just a couple of questions, and one to build on that state of good repair on the pavement. With heavier vehicles, are we seeing more deterioration, and how are we planning for that? And then another question, Mike Pimentel brought up the possibility of bus on shoulders. So in our analysis of that, are our shoulders ready for that kind of, and how does that fit into the asset management plan? And then a question about our plan. Stephen Keck mentioned our rolling stock zero emission vehicle plan for Caltrans. So is that part of your asset management dollars that you were showing us, where you have your 45% short, or you have 45% of what you need, I think is how it went. So I think those are kind of my big questions. And then from my day job perspective, the prices are going up rapidly. Our subs cannot hold their bids more than just a few days anymore. So on the construction side, at least in the commercial real estate, we have seen a dramatic increase in prices. So my question is, how is pricing figured into your asset management plan?
Great,
So-
thanks. Thanks, Commissioner Inman. So I'll try to take them in order, and correct me if I miscaptured your comments, but certainly heavier vehicles are going to cause deterioration faster. It is difficult sometimes to quantify that if it's a short duration, but I don't, the commission is probably aware that in the COVID pandemic, the department has increased the gross vehicle weight from 80,000 pounds to 88,000 pounds for certain goods movement to facilitate our response to the pandemic. This was primarily done for oxygen and early on for water and other basic necessities that we were having trouble getting into our stores. At the time that we made that change, we acknowledged that we were going to incur additional damage or more rapid damage, but it's very difficult to put an exact number on that. There's been countless research projects done in this area to try to quantify it, but it is very difficult, particularly for assets that are expected, like in the case of a bridge that's expected to last 50, 60 years. We talk about a 6-month weight increase, on a short-term basis. What did that do to a 50, 60-year life? Very difficult to answer that. Your second question related to bus on shoulders. I think we're looking at this. I know a number of other DOTs are doing this as a way to get additional capacity, particularly during rush hours. The challenge there is, was the shoulder designed to carry vehicle traffic on an ongoing basis? Some of our shoulders are, some of them have not. And I think, that's a location-specific answer as to whether you can support that without doing additional structural work in the pavement section. And then your last question was your third question was related to zero-emission vehicles. In our 2019 plan, we had zero-emission vehicles as a line item objective that was driven by the governor's zero-emission vehicle action plan. We had some investment. Since then, even at the time that was being done, we got feedback from the commission that you wanted us to work with our partners. And I think we have had, as a department, great success in working with external partners to the shop to fund a lot of the zero-emission vehicle installations. But we continue to do it within our facilities where it makes sense. We want to build facilities that are modern, that can support our move to zero-emission vehicle, but we don't have a specific line item in this plan. It's more in conjunction with other work at this point. And then your last point had to do with bid prices. And bid prices have been holding pretty steady. We're starting to see some increase now as things start to build back up. You probably heard in the news that materials, particularly lumber and other raw materials, have really skyrocketed in price due to lack of availability, and that is certainly starting to be reflected in our bids.
Okay, well, thank you. This is a very detailed answer. Thank you so much. Vice Chair Alvarado, I know you have some comments.
Michael and Tim, thank you. And I may sound like a broken record here, but that was a perfect illustration on that slide. Now, if you look at, we're only at 45% of our need. Take SB1 out of that formula. And now you know why we're so protective of SB1 money and taking money out of the different accounts and have it redirected. We made promises to folks based on that, spending the money where we thought it would do the best good. And, you know, and that's why I have to just keep pounding and defending SB1. We would not be at 45% without the funding from SB1. You know, a lot of people went out and campaigned through the legislature. My friend sitting up in the left-hand corner over there gave up his job for it. And then we had to go out and convince the public that, you know, to vote no on an initiative to protect the money, which is why, you know, I'm emotionally invested in SB1 and Prop 6. And my friend over there, as a matter of fact, too. I owe him a beer. So, Michael, thank you for your presentation, and maybe just for curiosity's sake, if you could make that same graph without SB1 monies.
I'm sure we'd be happy to do that for you. It will not be a very pretty picture. My guess is that funding would be under 20% of need without SB1.
Well, but I think we need to see it.
Sure, well, I'm happy to do that, Commissioner.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Senator Newman and commissioners, anyone else would like to speak on this item? Okay. With that, I believe we have no public comment. Justin, can you confirm that?
Yes, Chair Norton, there's no other public comment at this time.
Well, thank you very much for a very exciting presentation, and we look forward to your follow-up with that additional information that was requested today. Thank you so much. With that, we're moving on to item 23, the comments on the draft 2021 State Highway System Management Plan. Tim?
Thanks, Chair Norton. Commissioners, item 23 is an action item. I'd like to build upon the previous book item on the State Highway System Management Plan. Caltrans submitted the draft 2021 plan to the Commission for review and comment prior to the February 15th due date. Commission staff has reviewed the plan and prepared comments for transmittal to Caltrans and has determined that it has fulfilled the requirements of the Streets and Highway Code. Caltrans has made the plan available to regional transportation agencies for final comment and will include and respond to comments in the from the Commission and these agencies in the final plan. Caltrans has made improvements to the plan by providing additional detail on how the investment plan was applied to the unconstrained need of 34 performance objectives and the Transportation Asset Management Plan targets. The plan also depicts how the performance measures relate to the primary goals of the Caltrans 2020-2024 strategic plan. Commission comments range from a request to work with the Commission staff to reassess the existing supplementary asset targets, provide detail on how safety goals will be measured and monitored, and clarifying needs on the state highway system on how needs on the state highway system addressed through programs outside of the SHOPP and maintenance programs are incorporated into the asset management framework. Caltrans is required to transmit the final plan to the governor and the legislature by June 1st, and Caltrans will be providing an update to the Commission prior to the submittal at the May 2021 Commission meeting. Commission staff has reviewed the draft 2021 State Highway System Management Plan and recommends approval of these comments presented in Attachment A of this item and transmittal of these comments to Caltrans.
Okay, we have no public comment. Senator Newman and commissioners, do you have any comments on this? If not, can we entertain a motion to support?
Commissioner Alvarado makes a motion to support.
Okay.
I'll second.
Commissioner Akers seconds. Wonderful. Douglas, can you please read the roll?
Commissioner Alvarado.
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Davis.
Aye.
Commissioner Eager.
Aye.
Commissioner Grisby.
Aye.
Commissioner Guardino. Commissioner Guardino. Commissioner Inman.
Aye.
Commissioner Kehoe.
Aye.
Commissioner Liu.
Aye.
Commissioner Martinez.
Aye.
Commissioner Tavalloni. Chair Norton.
Aye.
Chair, the item is approved.
Wonderful. Okay, we are on item 24, recommended asset management target changes. Tim and Mike Johnson again.
Commissioners, item 24 is an action item. The Commission adopted Transportation Asset Management Plan guidelines in 2017, following the requirement of Senate Bill 46. These guidelines require that the plan include pavement, bridge, drainage, as well as a list of supplementary assets on the state highway system. Per Government Code 14.526.4, the Commission shall adopt targets and performance measures reflecting state transportation goals and objectives. The Commission adopted the current Transportation Asset Management Plan performance targets in 2018. Caltrans is proposing revisions to the performance targets for bridges and drainage that were previously adopted. Michael Johnson, the statewide asset management engineer for Caltrans, is here again to discuss the basis to the proposed revisions. After hearing from Caltrans, commissioners will be given an opportunity for questions and comments. Mike?
Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Commission. As Tim mentioned, we originally recommended and the Commission adopted asset management targets. As we've matured in our asset management work, we have some new understanding of a couple of these targets, and we're proposing a recommendation for a change today. Next slide. A little bit of background. Senate Bill 46 gives the Commission the authority to establish asset management condition targets. That's the purpose of the action item today. The targets that are in place were adopted based on information that was available from 2016. And the targets that were adopted predate the passage of Senate Bill 1. And this is really important because that's how we ended up really with two sets of performance targets in some cases. So nearly 5 years have passed since we set the initial targets. We have got a much better understanding and insight into these targets than we did at that time. And in some cases, a couple of these targets are overstating needs, and we would like to try to rectify that here today. Next slide. So this is sort of the spoiler alert, but this is the recommendation. Each of the targets, the top table 1 is for bridges, and the bottom table 2 is for drainage systems or culverts. We are not recommending any change to the poor condition of either one of those. We are recommending change to the fair condition of both. And so I'll make our case as to why we think this is appropriate. And then we'll circle back to this table at the end of the presentation. Next slide. So I'm going to start with bridges first. The bridges that are open to public traffic greater than 20 feet in length are required to be inspected in accordance with federal regulation. These bridges are typically inspected once every 2 years, although there are some that differ from that standard. But the Federal Highway Administration mandates that these inspection standards are done consistently from state to state in the United States so that all of the information can be brought together at the national level for defense purposes. The Federal Highway Administration provides an annual inspection oversight of Caltrans program. And at the time these targets were being changed, one of the things that was adding to the complexity is that the condition assessment methodologies for bridges in particular was going through the rulemaking process. In other words, it was draft in the federal regulations at the time that the targets were established. Next slide. So one of the nuances with the way that bridges the condition is assessed is that the federal government looks at really 3 major components: the deck of the bridge, what is called the superstructure, which are primarily the girders that carry the vehicle loads to substructure components that then carry it down to the ground. The overall condition of a bridge is the lowest of these 3 ratings. Next slide. So why make a change? I mentioned that the bridge targets were set when the federal rule was still draft. In other words, we had a draft idea of what the condition assessment methodology was going to be, but since we set these targets, that methodology has been finalized. Now, even though the methodology was finalized, until you start applying it to your inventory, it's hard to know exactly where things are going to shake out. And so we're at a point now where we've gone through the entire inventory and we have a much better handle on where things shake out. Furthermore, our current fare target is overstating the need, as I just noted in the State Highway System Management Plan, because it's in many cases, it's not supported by feasible work. I will mention that the draft, the State Highway System Management Plan that you reviewed had the targets changed as I'm proposing here. If the commission were to not adopt the recommended changes, then the unconstrained need would increase. The problem is there's not necessarily work behind that. And so in my opinion, we would be misrepresenting the true need of fair condition bridges. Another point with respect to the bridges is that bridges will spend the majority of their life in fair condition. We did some analysis. We looked at all bridges that had transitioned from good to fair in the last 10 years and found that on average, a brand new bridge will stay in good condition for only 12 years. After 12 years, it will transition into fair, and it will probably stay there for the next 40 to 50 years before it starts entering poor and it gets replaced. Additionally, when we were doing our analysis of the fair target, we found that 15% of brand new bridges that are entering the inventory are entering in fair condition, not good. And I have some pictures to explain why this is happening. But I think the main message I would like the commission to come away with is that fair condition is safe, and it's really a cost-effective condition to maintain our assets in. Next slide. So this is a graph going back to 2010 that shows the information that we had available at the time the targets were set. The green line represents good condition, the yellow or gold line is fair, and the red line is poor. And at the time we set the targets or recommended the targets for the commission, we were looking at fair, which was undergoing a multi-year downward trend. We had just received, or SB1 had just passed, and we had anticipated additional funding. And so at the time we set these, we had a 21% of the inventory was fair. We set the target at 15, thinking that it was reasonable to get a little bit better improvement after the passage of SB1. Next slide. But that's not really what happened. This is really what happened. And the reason that it changed so dramatically in 2016 was in part because of changes that were introduced by AASHTO and how bridges are assessed. The passage of MAP 21 and the new rulemaking process all kind of had this intersection of change at the same time. And as a result, fair condition in effect was recharacterized to be something different than it was prior to 2016. And so as we look from 2016 up through 2020, we see that the fair condition assets are continuing to increase and in effect, taking away from good. So as we get more fair, we're losing it from good. They're converging back onto an area of about 50%, which is where we were in about 2010. Next slide. So how does this happen? So here's a series of photos. If you look at the very left photo, this is a bridge deck. It's in poor condition. It's patched, it's unsound. And so we go out and we do a project and we get a after project condition in the middle slide. Deck goes from poor to good. But underneath the bridge, on the far wall, opposite of that red truck in the photo, you see the substructure of this bridge. And if you look really, really closely, you see a a cosmetic crack in that substructure element. That cosmetic crack is enough to classify the substructure as fair condition, meaning we did everything right on this bridge. We moved the condition from poor, but it's going to land in fair. And we're seeing this on a number of different instances. Next slide. So here's another set of photos. These are brand new bridges. So the photo on the left is showing the deck of a brand new bridge, and you can see some fine cracking. These are cosmetic cracking. We try to prevent these cracks, but ultimately it's inevitable that concrete will crack, particularly for a bridge that moves around a lot. In this case, this is enough for this bridge deck of this brand new bridge to be classified as fair, and therefore the overall condition of the bridge is fair. However, this bridge deck is perfectly safe. It will last and live like this for 40 or 50 years in most cases. Similarly, on the right is showing a bridge column. Again, somewhat cosmetic cracking, but based on the condition assessment methodology that's mandated in federal regulations, this is a fair condition column. Next slide. Here's another very common situation. These are columns of a bridge that are spanning over a waterway. The waterway will carry with it small rocks and pebbles that over time will give the concrete an exposed aggregate look like this. Now, homeowners will pay top dollar to have this on your pool deck, but based on federal criteria, if you have exposed aggregate like this on your column, this column is considered fair. The bridge condition will never get better than fair in this case. And furthermore, there's really no feasible treatment that any bridge engineer would recommend for this. It's perfectly safe. It can last and live like this for decades without any intervention. Next slide. I wanted to provide some context. So I pulled some information of all 50 states and US territories and plotted them on the scatter plot here. Now, I want to just call your attention. This is the national highway system. The national highway system includes the state highway system and some very important local roads. So it's not exactly the same as the state highway system. However, it is heavily influenced by the targets that were set by the commission. And the little red dot there is California. We have the single most aggressive fair target in the entire nation for the national highway system. Our peer states are shown in yellow. So you see Arizona to the left and Oregon and Nevada to the right. And all of the other 50 states, or the remaining 50 states, are shown in all the blue dots. So we're proposing to right-size this fair condition target about 50%. We would still be better than the majority of states in terms of aggressiveness for this fair target in the country. Next slide. Okay, so switching gears over to our drainage target. Initial targets were set the same time period, but the drainage inventory has been being developed really for some years, and I'll show a chart of it. But at the time the targets were set, we had only inventoried about 50% of the culverts in California. And so we had to, make some educated guesses. As the inventory has become more complete and the known condition is become clear, there is a need for us to recommend a change to the fair condition target. One of the things that's driving this is also feedback from all of our districts, because initially when we set the targets, we thought that we could do preservation treatments on these fair culverts. And in most cases, that involves lining a culvert on the inside to extend its life. However, with climate change and more extreme weather, we're actually finding that a lot of our culverts need to be upsized to have more capacity. So lining them becomes sort of counter to the need that we have for the culvert to convey water. As a result, a lot of culverts that we might want to do preservation on, we're actually having to replace and upsize. So once you realize that that's occurring, you know, we are getting feedback from our district saying, well, why are we replacing culverts in fair condition when we have poor condition culverts that we could be replacing? Doesn't that make more sense? And it does once you have come to the conclusion that preservation treatments are not as viable in all cases as we originally thought. The other thing that's driving our recommendation here, and I'll show you the graph on the next slide, is that we have been building an inventory since 2006. And as we are nearing the completion of the full inventory, which is scheduled for 2023, we will circle back on these culverts that were first inventoried in 2006. Our deterioration modeling indicates that a greater percentage of those culverts will have now moved into fair condition. And so we are anticipating that to occur as we start doing our second inspection on this inventory. Next slide. So here's the graph that shows the cumulative quantity of culverts in feet on the left vertical axis, and then by year. And you can see that our inspections have really been ramping up. And since we set the targets in 2016, we have literally doubled the inventory that we have from 10 million to 20 million feet. And as a result of that, we have a much better handle on the condition. And this is a perfect, graphic to show that as we go back to those culverts that were first inspected in 2006, 2007, 2008, by 2023, a number of those will be sitting there for 15, 16, 17 years. And there's ongoing deterioration that has been occurring that we are projecting at this point. Next slide. So back to my spoiler alert slide. Because of all the reasons I just laid out, we are recommending that the commission adopt a fair condition target change from 15% for bridges to 50%, and for drainage systems from 10 to 20. Next slide. So what is the impact of changing the target? First and foremost, no compromise in asset safety. There's nothing here that is going to lead to an unsafe situation. There is no change in SB1 performance metrics here. Because if you recall, SB1 doesn't use bridge condition, it uses number of fixes. And for drainage systems, SB1 does not have a fair target. It combined good and fair together, and this action would have no impact on that. Changing the targets will align the needs with the viable work. And I think that's important, that if we are going to state that we have needs, that we can point to specific assets that need work. We'll have more accurate long-term reporting of expected outcomes. And really, we have recognized this for more than a couple of years, to be honest with you. And because of that, our investment plan that we've been developing, that we just talked about in the State Highway System Management Plan, has not been devoting funds to these fair condition needs, because there is no viable work behind it. And so the long and the short of it is that there will be no change in the proposed State Highway System Management Plan investment plan, constrained investment plan, because of this target change. So for all of those reasons, I would recommend that the commission adopt the proposed fair targets, revised fair targets for bridges and drainage systems.
Well, thank you so much. This is a very thorough presentation. I see that we have no public comment on this item. Commissioners, do any of you wish to speak on this? If not, I'd like to entertain a motion in order to adopt the new targets as recommended.
I would, can you hear me, Chair Norton?
Yes, sir. Mm-hmm.
Forgive me, my 4-year-old is in the background talking loud, so I wasn't sure. Real life under COVID. I move that we support the recommended target changes.
Thank you, Commissioner Gardino. Do you have a second?
Grisby seconds.
Thank you so much. Douglas, could you please read the roll?
Commissioner Alvarado,
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Davis,
Aye.
Commissioner Eager,
Aye.
Commissioner Grisby,
Aye.
Commissioner Guardino,
Aye.
Commissioner Inman,
Aye.
Commissioner Kehoe,
Aye.
Commissioner Liu,
Aye.
Commissioner Martinez,
Aye.
Commissioner Tavaloni, Chair Norton.
Aye.
Chair, the item is approved.
Thank you so much. Commissioners, we are going to go from items 25, 26, and 27, and then we are going to end today's deliberations and start up again tomorrow with item 28. And with that, I just would like Teresa to present item 25, the Local Assistance Program Stewardship and Oversight.
Thank you, Commissioner. Item 25 is an information item. Dee Lamb, Local Assistance Division Chief, is here to give you a presentation of the Local Assistance Program Stewardship and Oversight. Dee?
Dee, is your audio working?
Chair Norton, she has not connected to the audio yet.
Okay, we'll give her some time. Is it working now?
Not yet. D, it says you need to enter the audio pin. You're on via phone. We just sent it to you.
Okay. Teresa, while we're waiting for Dee, can you give us a little synopsis of this item to prepare us for what we're going to hear?
Yes, Commissioners, as you know, a lot of the programs under the Commission's purview do go through local assistance, whether it is a federal program or state-funded program or federally funded program. And so there is quite a bit of funding that go through the local assistance process. And so Dee Lamb is going to be providing us an overview as to their oversight and what is it that they do so that you can see the picture of the magnitude of the work that local assistance does do. I believe there were a couple of questions that we've had directly to local assistance, and hopefully Dee within her presentation will provide us that the answers to those questions that some commissioners have. Are you connected, Dee?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, perfect.
All right.
Okay,
Good
perfect.
job.
I know. Okay, I'm going to try to make this as quick as I can. I know it's late. But Teresa, thank you for the introduction. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Commissioner, Senator Newman, CTC staff, and others joining us today. So I'm Dee Lamb, Division Chief of Caltrans Division of Local Assistance. Definitely thank you for the opportunity to present this information to provide an overview of our program stewardship and oversight. So real quick, stewardship is defined as ensuring efficient and effective use and management of program funds. The oversight piece is defined as ensuring programs and projects comply with federal and state laws and regulations. I think the discussion throughout today definitely nicely teed up the presentations I have before you. Tidbits on the strategic alignment, some discussion on the performance management of data, of course, the safety element. I heard quite a bit on the partnerships and outreach opportunities, and this is great. It has, it's definitely connected to what I have to share. So let me move on to what I have to share, or what I'd like to share with all of you here present. It's a little bit of who we are, our mission, our program scope, our program management, project oversight, and our future direction. Next slide, please. Okay. So I'd like to share our program mission and really how we support Caltrans to serve the greater needs, transportation needs for all people. So first, I'd like to start with the department's mission, which is to provide a safe and reliable transportation network that serves all people and respects the environment. So for local assistance program, we definitely support the department's mission by helping our partners and local agencies deliver local transportation projects to enrich our communities. Now, these local transportations projects complete that transportation network as dutifully noted in the department's mission. I've got California, kind of the map of California there on the slide there. In my mind, leading this charge, I always kind of think about how local assistance rounds out that network along with our modes, state highway system and such. So the department, as owner and operator of the state highway system, is responsible for delivering safety, operations, maintenance, efficient movement of people and goods in compliance with laws and regulation for projects on the state highway system. But on the other hand, the department is also, as a steward of federal aid and state transportation funds, we also have the oversight responsibility to ensure compliance with state and federal requirements, current laws, policies, and practices for projects off the state highway system. Now, the successful oversight and delivery of these local projects definitely is not made possible without the close working relationships. And I know I've got some partners listed on this slide there. Of course, this is by no means an exhaustive list of crucial partnerships that we have. It is not just a mere listing of partnerships, but I think I do want to call your attention to the countless hours and dedication behind the scenes operations to bring actions before the commission for approval at every commission meeting. I know there's always a long list of various actions that the commission here reviews and approves for the department. So next slide, please. Just gonna double check slides here. So I wanted to share a little bit about the scope of our program. And a lot of times, I think we don't always get an opportunity to share the magnitude and the enormity of the program. So I'd like to start off by describing kind of local assistance by the numbers. The program receives approximately $2.5 billion annually, spread over different programs, which includes our federal programs, our state programs, and special funds or augmented funds. We currently manage a portfolio of projects that include 4,000 active, roughly approximately 4,000 active projects spread across these programs, valued at approximately $13.6 billion, and this is our portfolio that we manage. The program is ever growing, as you know. We see approximately 700 new projects added annually. So I think with that, oversight is carried by Caltrans Local Assistance. I do want to note by our headquarters and our district staff. We are definitely small, but I think in many ways mighty, assisting 650 local agencies plus countless partners to ensure that we oversee the successful delivery of the local transportation projects. Now, as you know, that is no easy feat. And I want to take just a quick moment to acknowledge the headquarters and district local assistance team for their dedication to the department and all stakeholders, and especially during these trying times. Next slide, please. So you see a table with various bucket areas, and so in thinking of how I was going to coordinate or organize this information to present to you to where it can be, I think, succinctly delivered, we thought about, okay, at this table there are so many stakeholders that come together, right, for various aspects of the overall guidance or overall oversight. So how do we ensure effective and efficient compliance and provide that technical training and guidance with the limited resources given? So if you can follow with me using two lenses, we're going to look at this complex responsibility from the programmatic lens, and then we'll look at it from a project lens. So let's tackle lens number one. So on this slide, we illustrate the program management piece. We continually engage our partners and agencies in various settings, including standing committees, workshops, trainings, consultations, you name it. So let's hone in on the policy and guidance piece, and I'm going to go to manuals. So in addition to drafting, editing, improving our manuals and forms, We have to consult with legal, facilitate partner reviews, peer reviews, incorporate comments, a lot of feedback in our manuals. And there's various chapters guiding various programs and all aspects of our project delivery for our local partners. And what we also do is, I'll go ahead and focus in on trainings. We provide about 27 in-classroom and 19 online trainings. That definitely does not include the trainings that we hold district-wide. We hold academies. We hold federal and state training that, again, includes all aspects of project delivery. We hold labor compliance trainings and so much more. And from the discussions that I heard today, definitely we're honing in and focusing our training for agencies that need that additional guidance. The smaller agencies, I think our districts do a phenomenal job with our disadvantage and our smaller agencies that, experience a lot of turnover, wear many hats. And so I definitely want to acknowledge the work that's done daily with our agencies. A tad bit on audits and corrective action plans. I know that we work continuously with agencies to develop, say like with these audit findings, to develop a corrective action plan, definitely with the goal of improving compliance systems, process, and procedures. And in some cases, audits, of individual projects identify weaknesses in some procedures or process that make certain costs questioned or ineligible. So while the public may receive the value of the project where the work was completed as expected, some of the costs may be questioned due to certain procedures not conforming to regulations. And then there are other cases where additional documentation of the questioned or disallowed costs may be produced by the auditee to justify the expenditure. I wanted to touch a little bit on that. And as I know, Commissioner Liu, you had some thoughts about the audits at the last commission meeting. I do want to say that we are definitely proactively looking at various mandates and sanctions. We are tag teaming with our legal counterparts within Caltrans or legal counsel to look at our program's role in enforcing and monitoring corrective actions, common audit deficiencies, and really with the goal of, again, bolstering and improving agencies' practices. So I do want to say that is, we're actively working on that with our legal team. I do want to focus kind of like the bookends is what I kind of, map in my mind. One of the bookends is that financial fiscal management. Program managers, work diligently to manage, monitor, and track program project funding. We also work with regional agencies in managing and monitoring the augmentation funds. We ensure obligation authority delivery, timely use and monitoring, tracking of obligation authority. The other bookend is the operations hub, our project implementation arm. To me, this is an area within our division, within our program that continuous review of authorizations that you see before you, or allocations you see before you, the invoicing, the field reviews, the final vouchering, and this is in collaboration with our districts. Wow. So next slide, please. Okay, so I'm going to move on to lens number 2. That's the project management lens. Really, it's like at the project level, what are the checks and balances? Now, again, here's a figure for contemplation. Local Assistance Program processes over 13,000 project delivery actions per year. I know some of these actions do not come before you, and some do as needed, right? So sometimes, the local agency, our local assistance program, we're referred to as the mini Caltrans within Caltrans as we touch every phase of the project delivery cycle for local projects. I'm only going to briefly step through some key highlights. So with programming, projects enter our division's portfolio in many different ways. So some involve CTC, some involve FHWA, while others are disaster-driven or selected by Congress earmarks. So regardless of how they originate, DLA begins to track and monitor them once officially programmed. It starts with updating program guidelines, opening call for projects, intake of applications, evaluations, ranking, selecting programming, tracking, monitoring. We're getting, better and better at data collection, which I know was spoken about at our meeting today as well. And then I just want to say that on our other phases, and we're going to have a follow-up workshop to really drill down on the project level accountability. And I know I don't have time to be able to do that for us here, but I just want to, I think the takeaway here is these elements are continuously processed, and we always look for ways to improve our processes and our systems. So I think with that, I will definitely, let's go to the next slide, please. So I'd like to close out this presentation by calling your attention, and I think this is very timely, that we've embarked on a very opportune time to align our local assistance program to support the people-focused Caltrans Strategic Management Plan, as mentioned by Stephen Keck on behalf of Director Tokes at the earlier in our meeting. It's super opportune for us. There are definitely not only the Caltrans Strategic Management Plan, there's the CTP 2050, there's the modal plans, there's the what I call kind of guideposts that I think local assistance has the opportunity to engage in more proactively. What you have before you are the 5 focus areas that I know Director Tokes talks a lot about. And I wanted to kind of step through some of the key directional changes. In some cases, just not complete changes, but it could be a shift. It could be a shift in culture. These are some of the evaluations we're doing behind the scenes for our local assistance program. So I'll start with partnerships. So, to me, the local assistance program is just this face, for Caltrans and for the with our local partners and all of our stakeholders. Our interaction is just countless interaction that we have. Active engagement is definitely crucial. So we're reaching out. In fact, I do want to say we're reaching deeper for more opportunities to engage our partners. We have formed work groups to mitigate common challenges, better develop practices, and just a few examples is our increased focus on small business and disadvantaged business contracting opportunities, our increased coordination efforts with local partners on obligation authority monitoring usage. I definitely want to thank the RTPA group in this engagement. Our increased focus technical assistance, not only to larger organizations, but also the smaller organizations. I want to touch a little bit on efficiency. We talk a lot about what is this risk-based stewardship and oversight, or this risk management framework. I do want to share that we are definitely looking at, we've identified and we're looking at ways to mitigate risk and minimize the risk for the program at both the program level and the project level. And this is to ensure compliance. And how do we effectively, manage our program? I'll move to innovation. I'm really looking forward to carrying the torch to improving our data quality and systems. I think there's a dire need to better monitor, track, and analyze data to inform our reporting. And I think it's one thing collecting the data and the right data, but the ability to analyze and how do we put it forward for reporting and how are these metrics and performances realized is, I think, crucial. We've embarked on developing a performance measures project deadline tracking tool. We're starting simple, and then we're doing some pilots to seeing how this is going to work, and then I'm seeing more, and then move towards more of sophisticated systems. But it's going to take some building blocks. And I think I'll go ahead and jump over to safety, because I think safety, then the discussion on safety is definitely a good segue to my presentation on the Highway Safety Improvement Program that I will give in a few minutes. But definitely for safety, we continuously oversee safety programs and projects. we definitely
So,
provide safety
Dee,
training.
maybe,
So I think with that,
I'm sorry to interrupt you, Dee, but maybe you can cover safety in your next presentation just
I
because
will.
of the timing.
Timing,
And so,
yes.
would that be okay?
That's
Okay,
perfectly
thank you.
fine.
Okay, thank you. And commissioners, if you have questions regarding local assistance, you can send them to me and I will make sure I get that information from Dee. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay. So I think we're ready for the highway safety.
Okay, we did have one question that we heard early, and that is Commissioner Liu. So Commissioner Liu, we're going to give you the one and only public comment on this. We have no other public comment, and then we'll move to item 26.
Sure, I'll try to make it quick. I mean, to remind people that last meeting, our auditor, the Caltrans auditor, said that there were some local agencies that owed Caltrans some money, and I asked the question, we keep paying these local agencies money, and I think it's just not a good idea to keep giving people money if they owe you money. And you guys might find it a little funny, but just about 30 minutes ago, my daughter came in here and put $20 on the table because she owed me $20. And I was just thinking this morning how I wasn't going to give her any more money until she paid me the $20 she owed me. So I laughed a little bit when she came in here and put that money on the table. But and what I'm hearing from you, I think, is that you're working on this. You're talking to legal counsel. You're trying to come up with a solution to it. So I think I've heard that you're making progress, but it did hit me when you were talking that, you probably have your own list, the auditor's list, then you probably have a list that's probably even bigger of other cases. And I'm sure, I trust that you're going to come up with a process and a policy to deal with this. And I would just encourage and like to know where you are when you figure that out. That's it. Thank you.
Definitely.
Yeah, and Commissioner, we will make sure to follow up on this. Yeah, this is an important question. I think we're also taking a look at somewhat related items, such as agencies that have not submitted final delivery reports on projects that they're required to do that. So, if if the requirement isn't enough, how do we incentivize that reporting? And perhaps we shouldn't be giving them more money until they submit some of the reporting. I mean, it's hard for us to say we have accountability if reports aren't being submitted. And I also wanted to really highlight something that Dee talked about just real quick. This is really important for the commissioners who've been around a little while. You remember we had a problem with the city of Arvin who had a challenge with the ATP grant. That got worked out with the COG there, but it was when these come up, they're 1 or 2 or 3 out of 4,000 that they're working on, and they've all come up before it's completely done and everything is paid. It's very few that actually get to the audit stage, but we really rely very heavily on Dee and her team taking a look at the materials when somebody asks for an allocation. They all we see is a vote box, and so things that are if they get missed there, it makes it hard for us as your staff to let you know there's an issue. So I appreciate that there are so few errors in the work that Dee's team is doing, and look forward to that continuing relationship.
Thank you so much. This is great. And this will conclude item 25, and we're going to move to item 26. John and Dee?
Yeah, real quick. Item 26 is perfect to follow 25. It's going to be Dee again, and we're going to zoom in on the Highway Safety Improvement Program. So it'll be a zoomed in look at one of the programs that the local assistance gives oversight for. So without further ado, go ahead, Dee.
Thank you, John, and thank you everyone again. Definitely, like I said in my previous presentation, over 30 programs, and it's vast. So we'll concentrate on the Highway Safety Improvement Program today. I know I've given the Highway Bridge Program presentation a couple meetings ago. Looking forward to providing more information on our programs in the future. The Highway Safety Improvement Program is a federally funded program that's managed by our department's Division of Safety Programs and our Division of Local Assistance, Office of Federal Programs, through a joint stewardship and oversight agreement with FHWA. So the HSIP designation, and I think you can advance to the next slide. I'm not going to go over the codes here, but the main point is to establish for achieving a significant reduction in fatalities and serious injuries on all public roads, including non-state-owned public roads and roads on tribal land. Next slide. So we wanted to kind of show you examples of our HSIP projects on local roads, and you'll see more examples as we progress in the presentation. You'll see here, you see the pedestrian activated beacons, bike lane improvements for safety pedestrians and bicyclists. We've got our signals, our curve warning signs, our right turn lanes, our bike lanes, and these are just examples of the projects, the HSIP projects. Next slide. So I do want to spend a little bit of time on the local HSIP advisory committee. I think this committee definitely is very valuable. A lot of discussion and topic areas and practices and decisions are made. So local highways, the HSIP advisory committee was officially formed in 2013, co-chaired by Caltrans and a local representative. The committee, with a total of 11 voting members, is a partnership between locals and the department, including members from FHWA, Caltrans, California Transportation, that's our California Transportation Cooperative Committee, the California State Association of Counties, and more. I won't list everybody here. So there's 6 meetings a year, and the committee provides high-level balanced strategic guidance on policies, procedures, project delivery, project programming, new developments on safety, countermeasures, and establishing set-asides for each call for projects. So our local assistants, our HSIP managers, provide staff support for the committee. Next slide. So I do want to say that these programs are definitely new to me, and I'm not going to be able to go in depth on the funding aspect of it, but we definitely can follow up with any questions you may have on funding. But the federal funds come into California from federal legislation through a series of transportation acts, and the current being the FAST Act. Federal apportionment of $205 million to California is evenly split between local and state HSIP, so that's $102.5 million each. So for local HSIP, $21 million is swapped out for the Regional Surface Transportation Program funds to fund ATP projects. The state HSIP is increased by $21 million due to the swap. So our local HSIP apportionment is $81.5 million. I think we can go to the next slide. Touch a little bit upon eligible applicants. So any local agencies that agency that owns, operates, maintains the public roadways, which includes cities, counties, and tribal governments, are eligible. We did note here that MPOs and RTPAs can send in applications on behalf of local agencies. Wanted to just give a snapshot of eligible applicants. We can go to the next slide. Project selection. So project selection is accomplished through call for projects that occurs every 2 years. These call for projects are typically announced around April, with applications due 4 to 5 months later. Selected safety projects are then incorporated into the FTIP. Each call for projects has 2 categories. One named the benefits cost ratio, which will be examined based on the BCR, and the other called set-asides will be evaluated based on criteria countermeasures designated by the local HSIP advisory committee. Local HSIP reviews all projects for completeness and select BCR projects with higher BCRs until the funding cutoff is reached. This BCR is different for each call depending on the number of applications received and funding available. Set-aside projects are evaluated based on the countermeasures designated by the committee. And then the committee further requires that each agency can only submit 1 project for each set-aside and sets the maximum funding for the set-aside project. Next slide. So project delivery or checks and balances. So we've created delivery requirements for all ongoing federally funded HSIP projects. The key delivery requirements are what you see here. So they include 2 authorization dates, authorization extension, and deprogramming warning. I don't know if I have time to go through and explain all the checks and balances, but if we do need more information, we can definitely provide that. I do want to move on to the next slide, which is our program performance. I think this slide would be of really good interest here. Got some stats to share with you. The local HSIP program began in 2005 and has gone through 10 project cycles since the first call in 2007. So nearly 1,466 projects worth with 1.1 billion HSIP funding have been delivered. 297 projects currently active, not including Cycle 10 projects that should be released soon. Approximately 95% of the safety projects have met authorization deadlines. Approximately 95% of the safety projects have been delivered into construction phase on time. And for Cycle 10 and possibly the future cycle, safety projects will be funded by state funds through SB 137. So this is the state bill that allows the department to exchange up to $100 million per year for the federal HSIP and or the National Highway Performance Program funds for state funds. And we'll go to the next slide. So upcoming improvements. Local HSIP will require each agency, and I think Michael B. Johnson had brushed on this, I believe so, will require each agency to have a local road safety plan or an equivalent in order to apply for the HSIP funding cycle in the future. Meanwhile, local HSIP have worked with FHWA to provide training for local agencies to assist agencies to develop these local road safety plans. And these trainings has been really successful. The training was offered at the end of February, March, and approximately 650 participants attended. Looking forward to incorporating ongoing safety practices done elsewhere, update our local, we'll definitely continue to update our website and our manuals. So there's a lot of improvements that are more procedural and programmatic that I know I won't go too deep into, but I think those are some of the key ones that I do want to share with everybody. So I think with that, there are some more slides, next slides on success stories and successful projects. So I think that concludes my presentation. Definitely willing to take any questions. I know we're well over time.
Well, first, Dee, I want to thank you for both these presentations. I want to commend you on really very descriptive and well done slides. First and foremost, I want to talk about that very nice presentations. You've heard that safety was hugely important to us at the beginning of this meeting, and you show a lot of the sort of physical improvements, but I guess I want your 30,000 foot view of what to do about this 13% increase in safety concerns and crashes, and how you're partnering with CHP to look at safety on our roadways, and then I'll open it up to other commissioner comments.
Yeah, so Vince Mamano mentioned our chief safety officer, and I do want to say that we are diligently and we work really hard together. I am super proud of our HSIP program managers and our office chief over federal programs with just oodles of expertise in this arena. I can definitely come back with more details, and I'd love to get more fine details on that for you. But I know we work just immensely with our chief safety officer. I know there's a lot of touch points on this, the SHSP as well. And we do engage nationally for best practices also. So We have a lot of best practices. Of course, we're always looking at how we can better, acquire this information and this data. We're always working with our local agencies to kind of take a deeper dive. But I know that there's definitely some more prescriptive that I want to give you, and I want to come back.
Great. If you could present at our next meeting in May, that would be wonderful, because this is a big concern, as you can tell, for the entire commission, and we'd love to have some best practices and some conversation about what's being done. That would be great. And especially about worker safety as well, along with construction and infrastructure repair, because, worker collisions and really homicides are really tragic, and we want to see them prevented.
Will do.
Thank you. If there's nothing more, this is an informational item. And so, Dee, I want to thank you. John, I want to thank you. Any other comments, commissioners? Okay, if not, we're going to move to our last item of the day, item 27. Alicia Sequeira-Smith, on the adoption of the 2021 Local Streets and Roads Funding Program Reporting Guidelines.
Thank you, commissioners. Good evening. Tab 27 is an action item to adopt the 2021 Local Streets and Roads Funding Program Guidelines. The proposed 2021 Local Streets and Roads Guidelines are attached in attachment B to this item. There have been no opposition received in regards to the changes proposed in the guidelines, and all feedback that we have received has been favorable from our stakeholders. It is staff's recommendation to adopt the guidelines.
Thank you so much. We have a request to speak for Commissioner Liu, and we have no public comment. So Commissioner Liu?
Yes, thank you, Chair Norton. Let me start by saying I fully support the brilliant idea we started off with this morning from Vice Chair Alvarado to try to secure $2 billion for unfunded ATP projects. My comment is more geared toward what happens if we don't succeed in that effort. We've already talked about the fact that, active transportation is our most underfunded and oversubscribed program. We have a long list of ATP projects that didn't receive funding in this cycle. In fact, there were 400 projects that didn't get funded today. And I was looking at these reporting guidelines, and I saw that local streets and road projects can and should include active transportation through the complete streets components on pages 7 and 8. I also saw on page 4 that the commission staff has a responsibility of providing technical assistance to cities and counties as they prepare their project lists. And so what I would like to do as we approve this is direct staff to work with those cities and counties as part of that technical assistance process and provide them with information about ATP project proposals that we received and that might, that are applicable to their city or county, and work with them if they need it on how to incorporate parts or all of these projects, these ATP projects, into the local streets and roads project lists. And this would have to happen pretty much immediately because those project lists are due to us on July 1st. And finally, I would like staff to, report back to me on whether this works, and provide a list of which agencies, local agencies, actually were capable of incorporating, some or all of the ATP projects into the unfunded ATP projects into their local streets and roads project list for the complete streets component. Thank you.
Thank you. Mitch, can you opine on this a little bit so we can understand how they can all be worked into the complete streets component?
Sorry, I just had to unmute and turn on my camera just to say, I think I'm going to turn to Alicia to give me the details on this. Yes, we can get them the lists of the projects, certainly. But in this program, it's really focused on fix it first. That they need to have a pavement condition index over 80 to get some of those flexibilities. And we have very little control over what they do, but we can provide them with that information. And let me turn to Alicia to see if there's something else I should be saying.
You pretty much nailed it, Mitch. Overall, really what we see is, and we do this research regularly and look, and what we can tell is roughly 1,784 of the projects that are being proposed or currently that are active in our expenditure reporting do show that they have ATP components in them or complete street components in them, and so they are included. So that is a large portion of the type of work that is coming through with the projects that are utilizing these program funds. And so I always think that that's a very positive thing that maybe not everyone realizes is actually occurring. The other aspect of that is we at the commission, we can review the projects, we can let them know and give them reminders that they can in fact use these funds for these types of components. But the language in the statute is very, very clear. And one of those things is when they're talking about complete streets and it's an eligible project type, in the statute, it actually has the language in there that says these complete street components such as sidewalks, bike lanes, curbs, ramps, in addition to one of the other project types such as safety, road, rehab, and rehabilitation repair. So those are always things that we need to keep in mind and that we do remind our jurisdictions of on a regular basis. And they do reach out to us if they were unsuccessful in things like local partnership program or in the active transportation program, and ask them ask us as staff if there's any way that they can incorporate those projects. And we do review them and give them advice and technical assistance on that. So I think overall it does happen, just not in a very direct way, such as you were mentioning, Commissioner Liu.
Thank you. I of course understand why it needs to be framed that way and why it's in the law that way. And I just think that there are maybe opportunities to go back to the unfunded ATP projects and say, can we incorporate them as part of this? And I just encourage you to do that, please, because we want to line that up as long as it's eligible and as long as it's complying with what was required. Thank you.
Of course, thank you.
Thank you so much. Could we entertain a motion on this item, please, commissioners?
Sure, I'll move the item.
Second,
Okay.
Commissioner Davis.
Excellent. Thank you. Commissioner Liu moves, Commissioner Davis seconds. Douglas, could you please read the roll?
Commissioner Alvarado,
Yes.
Commissioner Davis,
Aye.
Commissioner Eager,
Aye.
Commissioner Grisby,
Aye.
Commissioner Guardino, Commissioner Inman,
Aye.
Commissioner Kehoe,
Aye.
Commissioner Liu,
Aye.
Commissioner Martinez,
Aye.
Mr. Tavaloni, Chair Norton.
Aye.
Chair, the motion is approved.
Thank you. And thank you all for a very, very productive and thorough day. We will see you tomorrow at 9 in the morning. And we want to thank you for the end of day one.